Today I would like to talk to you about something that affects every one of us. Whether you have a small little shop that you're repairing some furniture, or you have a very large shop where you're producing thousands of items, we are all affected by this one thing: shop safety. I know, not the most glamorous subjects, but one that is incredibly important. And please stick around and enjoy the podcast. You might even learn something. Specifically, I'm going to talk about eyes, ears, nose, throat, and fingers. There are two types of woodworkers: those who have had an accident and those who are about to have an accident. So hopefully you'll take away something from this episode that will help prevent that, or at least stave it off or reduce the issue as much as possible. I myself have never had a serious accident. Knocking on wood. I did nick my thumb on the table saw one time. Scared the living bejeebers out of me. No blood. It kind of cut into the fingernail. But the most disturbing thing about it was I did not have any idea how it happened. And I went back through and kind of reconstructed what I had done. Honestly, I had not locked down the table saw fence. And as I was pushing this piece of wood through, I still don't know exactly how I did it, but as I was pushing the piece of wood through, the fence started to drift, and I was in essence cutting a bevel, which is really weird. And I was actually cutting like a 45-degree bevel on this to begin with. And so as I pushed through, it allowed that to kind of move out. It's hard to explain. Anyway, I nicked myself, scared the crap out of myself, and have vowed never to do that again. And of course, I've had other, injuries to the hand, edge tool cuts, and I was doing a tile job one time and snapped a piece of towel and felt a very sharp throbbing sensation, and looked down, and that tile, when it snapped, ripped half my thumb open. That was a trip to the doctor. But other than that, I have been pretty lucky. Well, there was a time with that splinter that the doctor had to dig out. Anyway, so let's talk about eyes, ears, nose, throat, and fingers. Let's start with the eyes. Norm Abrams, New Yankee Workshop, for 30-some years, reminded us that there is no more important rule than to wear these safety glasses. If you're a big tough guy and you don't need to wear these safety glasses everyone's talking about, hey, free country, go right ahead. How much time are you going to lose when you're sitting in a doctor's office or maybe the emergency room because you got a chunk of wood in your eye and it hurts like bejeebus? Are you actually going to get that project finished and delivered on deadline? Probably not. And this is something that you can eliminate simply by putting on a pair of glasses. Now I'm over 35, which means that my eyes are not as good as they were when I was 25, and I wear glasses throughout the day. They are not OSHA approved safety glasses, but they are a polycarbonate, which is the same material they make the safety glasses. They haven't been tested, yada, yada, yada. And there are so many different options today. Some of you may remember the old birth control safety glasses we had to wear in shop class in high school. Yeah, there's no way you're getting a date wearing those. You can get prescription safety glasses. I'll have a link to a couple places down below. Side shields. If you normally wear glasses, invest the $3.27 into a set of side shields. These are just little plastic rubber thingies that slide over the temples, and it eliminates that dust coming in from the side. I'll admit I don't always wear them, but if I'm doing something that is really kicking up the chips, I will definitely put them on. You could also just go with what's referred to as a over-the-glasses glasses. It's a safety glass that is designed to fit over your normal everyday glasses. And they're comfortable, they work really, really well, and I highly recommend them. And of course, there's goggles. These have a seal around them that fit very, very securely to the face, and I have a pair that on some operations, they are indispensable. And of course, you always have face shields that you can wear. If I'm at the lathe and I'm throwing chips everywhere, you're darn right I have that face shield on, because it just, A, keeps stuff out of my face, my eyes, my beard, but it cuts down on the stuff that accumulates down your neck. Of course, a smock also does a very good job at preventing that. Where do I get my glasses? My prescription glasses I've been buying from $30glasses.com for years. All of my kids, I got glasses for them on the website. I've never had any trouble with them. They're very reasonably priced, very high quality. DeWalt also makes a really good safety glasses. And if you're into prescription safety glass with the OSHA stamp of approval, check out rx-safety.com. They have a very nice website, several styles that seem to look and function very, very well. Link in the show notes. Something else you ought to have handy is some type of an eye wash station. If you do get something in your eye, what are you going to do? Now, a lot of us, we're a one-person shop. We're working alone. And so you got to be able to self-administer first aid and get this thing out of your eye. I was on a job where I had to do some tuck pointing to a limestone fireplace. It wasn't very much. There was no way you were going to get a real professional like mason to come in and do this. It was just a few feet. And I was doing that, and of course I was an idiot, and when I was mixing up the mortar, I got a little of it splashed into my face. Now, I was out at this property, there was no one home, it's miles away from anyone. I could have called someone, but man, this really stung. And I remembered that I had been drinking a Diet Pepsi earlier that day, and with one eye closed, I wandered out to the work truck and found that Pepsi bottle, brought it back in, filled it up at the sink, and kind of just pulsed the water up into my eye, and it did a marvelous job of flushing that out. It was so great. I always keep an empty soda bottle like that. I no longer drink soda, but I keep a bottle lying around just for that particular reason. If you want one of the big fancy stations that you don't have to hook up with plumbing, check out Uline. They have a whole bunch of ones. You're going to pay, several $100s for one of those things, or just keep a soda bottle lying around full of water. Okay, so what about ear protection? I'll admit I was a little cavalier about this. I would sometimes wear hearing protection if something was really loud and annoying, but just cut a little bit of trim to go around a ceiling opening for a new attic stair, I didn't think it was worth the bother, until the owner of the house, a doctor, watched what I was doing and came out and said, there will come a time that you can't hear me. And I respected this doctor, and it's like, yeah, you're right. I need to do a better job of that. Not that my hearing was great to begin with. Thank you, USN. It was just something I wasn't that concerned. Well, he kind of made me a little bit more concerned, and I started wearing hearing protection. And honestly, I'm not going to call it an addiction, but I always wear my hearing protection now. My wife took me to it was a bar where she was meeting some of her coworkers, and it was loud. And this was a establishment that allowed dogs. They didn't serve food. And so people would bring their dogs, and it's kind of a family atmosphere, real cool. Music's playing, and it was loud. How loud, you ask? I actually pulled out my cell phone, which I have a little sound meter on it. It's an app. You can download it. It's really cool. And I was hitting 84 dB. The next day, I measured my table saw, my miter saw, and a couple other tools, and the only one that exceeded that was a router. So next time she wanted to take me, I grabbed my hearing protection, and she said, don't bother. You don't have to go. So what type of hearing protection should you have? Anything that works, anything that is comfortable, anything that you wear. Don't stuff cotton in your ears. That doesn't work. And if you really get into this, there's a noise reduction rating that they apply to hearing protection. Now, I personally wear hearing ear muffs most of the time because I have AM, FM radio, and I have Bluetooth on those. So I can fire up a podcast on my cell phone, connect it with Bluetooth, and happily work away for hours. A really inexpensive pair of hearing protection is going to do just the same thing, and you might spend like $20 on it. My Bluetooth, I think they're up around $65 or so. I've actually put some links in the show note of various types. The inexpensive adjustable safety ear muff protector is $11. Really? $11. Get a couple pair, leave them in the shop. If you have guests and they're watching you do something, hand them a pair of hearing protection. Now, I also bought a pair of Isotune Pro Bluetooth earplugs. Yeah, that's a mouthful. These are really cool. Now, they are expensive. This was kind of a, buy once, cry once type thing. They are so cool. These are noise canceling. You put these things in and you don't hear anything. These are OSHA compliant, and they're just really cool. They're designed so that you can carry on a conversation with someone, and if a noise kicks up, it cancels out that high noise over, I think it's 84 dB. That might even be adjustable on them. Very, very cool. They are a connected earbuds, where there's a wire that goes between them with a little control box, and I'll admit they're a little hard to get used to at first. They have a real squishy foam that you're supposed to squish down and then insert it into your ear, and there's a stiff wire that you bend to kind of conform to go around your ear. It took me a while to get used to that, but once I did, they just work wonderfully. I use them when I work out. They stay in place. They don't flop around. I don't have to worry about losing them. One minor downside I have found is that, they work a little too well. I was at the table saw the other day using these, and I listened to the tool sound. What is the tool doing? And with the Isotune earbuds, I heard nothing. I wasn't exactly sure the tool was on. If I have my earmuffs on, I can still hear the tool, and I can tell if I'm bogging down or if the cut's not right. And with the Isotunes, I couldn't hear that, and I actually kind of readjusted so that I could get a little more of that tool sound coming through. But they're really cool. They run about $80. There's a link in the show notes to Amazon, and they do have a new model that does not have the connective wire They are Bluetooth connected between the individual buds. They're a little pricey, but I'm perfectly happy with these. Nose and throat, which, well, we're actually talking about our lungs. How do we protect our lungs? There's two things that we're dealing with in the workshop environment. One is dust, the other is fumes. So let's talk about dust. Everyone loves dust collection. Well, not really, but it is one of those necessary things that we have to deal with whenever we create sawdust. Absolutely, 100%. The best way to deal with sawdust is to collect it at the source. As it is being made, collect that dust. If you have newer shop equipment, you probably have really good dust collection built into it. If you are using older equipment, you probably do not. I use an old contractor style table saw. The dust collection was this canvas bag that you were supposed to hook under the bottom of it where all the dust fell into. Yeah, that worked really well for about 3 times, and then that became a major pain. Now, I'm fortunate in my shop. I do have a dust collector that I built. It is basically a drop box with a Thane baffle on it. It's cost me, I might have $75 into the whole thing. And it works wonderfully. I have that hooked up to the table saw. It works very, very well. Not as good as probably a saw stop with the integrated dust hood right into it that collects everything at the saw blade, but for my shop it does okay. And I have found that the really annoying dust is what is generated on top of the table saw and not what gets sent down into the table saw, and hence the dust collection. I need to come up with some type of a over the saw guard integrated type system that I can collect more of that. Miter saws, yeah, they're notorious for just creating a cloud of dust. I have watched a lot of YouTube videos on miter saw stations and how to reduce the dust. I have built a box around my saw, and I kind of modified a dust pickup because the dust pickup on the saw, it just doesn't really work all that well. And what I have now works better than it originally did, but I am not going to win any awards with it. Cruise YouTube, you can find all kinds of different ways people have come up to try to combat this. It's a problem. And if you have older machines, well, you're just going to have to get creative. So you're out there in your shop, you're using your table saw, you're using your miter saw, you're collecting some of the dust, maybe you're collecting like 90% of the dust, but you're still getting dust up in the air. That's the one that we're really worried about. The stuff that falls to the floor, we're going to leave it on the floor. We can sweep that up. It's the dust that becomes airborne that we have to be concerned with. One way we can solve that problem is by using some type of air filtration system. These are those big units that hang on the ceiling, and it sucks air in one side through filters and blows it out the other side. I have one in the shop. I like it. It does a good job. It will not solve all the world's problems. I think the biggest benefit of these air filtration units is that they will get the suspended dust particulate out of the air over time. For instance, if you're out there in the morning working away, creating a lot of airborne dust, and you go to lunch, make sure that air filtration unit is running, and whenever you come back, chances are your shop air is going to be pretty darn clean. It is amazing how quickly it will scrub the air, but not exactly at the point of producing the sawdust. It takes a little bit of time for that to work. They can be kind of expensive. Some of these things have really, we're talking $700-800 for some of these, even more. And you can make one yourself. A box fan and a furnace filter. Boom. You have an air filtration system. Is it as good as the ceiling mounted ones? Maybe, maybe not. You can make the ceiling mounted ones. Check out old shop notes issues. There's plans, diagrams that you can craft these yourself. Or just a box fan and a furnace filter. There's one design that came out during COVID that used a box fan and a cardboard box that they mounted filters on. And that was simplified in taking 4 furnace filters, taping them together to form like a box, a cube, and then putting the box fan on top of it. And so what was happening when this was sitting on the floor, the box fan was blowing air up, drawing air in through the 4 furnace filters and filtering the air, and then the vertical airflow was doing a good job of circulating the air in the room. We also have floor-mounted air filtration units, which some people say work much, much better than the ceiling mounted. I have no experience with them, but it seems like a very possible idea. So if you don't have one, I would recommend checking into it. I would not want to work in the shop without one. I can't say that I use it every single day, but there are times where it's the difference between working in the shop and not working in the shop. And of course, you should be wearing a dust mask. Plain and simple. Something like a P100 dust mask. There are many, many, many different styles. 3M is really big in lung protection. They have numerous different models and styles. The important thing is that it is comfortable, you have a good seal, and you wear it. The best quality dust mask in the world does no good if you're not wearing it. So in addition to just general comfort of the mask, you should have one that doesn't fog up your glasses, which means that it has an air leak. And if you have a good fit, then you probably don't have those issues. Okay, I said that there are 2 things you have to worry about with your lung protection, one being dust, the other one is vapor. If we are doing something that causes vapors to escape, fumes, we have to protect our lungs from that. In the day, everybody used oil-based finishing products, and they are loaded with VOCs. What is a VOC? A volatile organic chemical. These are things like paint thinner, mineral spirits, turpentine, naphtha, xylene, and a host of other chemicals. The purpose of these chemicals is to be a carrier for the solids that make up our finishes. If you have a varnish, it's made up of 3 things: the solids, a binder, and some type of carrier. That would be the mineral spirits, the naphtha, whatever that chemical is. It's the carrier that does the off-gassing that stinks to high heaven. And probably the most offensive of these is lacquer. I just cannot stand the smell of lacquer. Any of the other finishes kind of bother me, but I'll tell you, lacquer just literally drives me out of the shop. I don't use lacquer. I don't like the way it smells. And there are parts of the United States and some countries where you can't even use these oil-based products because of air quality control laws. I am a member of a very loosely formed woodworking club. It's a bunch of older folks mostly who get together and they talk shop and share different things. And we had one meeting at a local cabinet shop. The guy does a pretty good business. He has several employees. He has a huge CNC, like a 5x10 CNC machine. Really, really nice. Great big pole barn. He probably has, 4,000, 6,000 square feet. It's a pretty good size operation. And he has an attached building to the main workshop that he does the finishing in. And so he was giving us a tour. He was showing us, this machine and that machine, and he stores his wood over here. It was all very good. He says, okay, let me take you into the finishing room. And it's an 8-foot overhead roll garage door. And he opened that garage door up, and I was hit with this wall of vapor. He had been finishing that day, and of course it's spray, and it was just overpowering. I kind of took a real deep breath and walked in and did a quick 180 and walked back out. I had to go outside and get my breath. I have no idea how he works in there. There has got to be some brain cell degradation going on there. If you're breathing that 8-10 hours a day. Oh my gosh, I could not do that. I mean, I would take up knitting before I would do that. Hence, waterborne finishes. The story I heard was that when California was really clamping down on their air quality, and if you ever flew into Los Angeles in the 80s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It was horrid. So they needed to do something. And one of the things they did is they basically outlawed high pressure sprayers. Cars, furniture, you hook it up to your air compressor, you blast 80 pounds through there, and material goes everywhere. You may know what I mean. They didn't use a spray booth. They used a fog booth where you had to get tricked out in, like a Tyvek suit, head to toe, safety goggles. It was kind of like going into a hazardous material, nuclear, waste handling facility. And you go in there and you have your spray gun and you start blasting that, and this cloud forms, and you kind of lose track of the person who's in there doing that. Geez, I hope he's okay. I can pull him out by the air hose if I have to. It was nuts. I mean, you literally put more material into the air than you did on the product. Well, California banned that, said you can't do that anymore. So industry had to come up with a solution. That solution was a high volume, low pressure spray gun, HVLP. Yeah, that's how we got that. Now they're everywhere. They're fantastic. Can't recommend them highly enough. In fact, maybe I should do an episode on spraying finish. So with an HVLP gun, you are not putting out nearly as much overspray. It really cuts down on material cost. And if you've bought, some finish lately, you know how much that has gone up. And so in addition to the spray units themselves that California went after, they also went after the material. These oil-based products that had a lot of VOCs, hence the advancement of waterborne finishes. Not water-based, they're waterborne finishes. The solids and the binders are still basically the same thing. They're in a water carrier now as opposed to a mineral spirit paint thinner type carrier. So just because the label says waterborne, some labels will say water-based, there are still VOCs in a lot of these products. They haven't been totally eliminated, but instead of like 700, parts per million or milliliters per liter, however they measure that, there's maybe 100. So there's a very significant difference. So you still need to pay attention it's very likely that you still should really wear, some protection whenever you're using the waterborne products. Now, there is a kind of a dirty little trick that some manufacturers are doing, or they used to do, this may be phased out by now, that the base product would have very, very low VOCs, sometimes no VOCs. But the tint, the color, the pigment would be absolutely loaded with VOCs. So whenever the air quality police inspect the product, it's like, oh, well, this has very low VOCs, and it passes, and they don't inspect the tint, or sometimes it's a hardener that goes into the product. That is chock full of VOCs. So you kind of have to be a little careful of that. Now, from a professional standpoint, I have found that in my area, people do not want stinky finishes. If I go into someone's home and I'm refinishing cabinets, I'm refinishing window trim, doors, something like that, they don't want to have to get a hotel room for 3 days while this stuff off-gasses. Just not going to tolerate that. When I make the argument that using the oil-based finish is so much more durable, it falls on deaf ears. They really don't care. So I have really started to switch over to waterborne product. Working in a shop attached to my house, I can tell you, my wife is very appreciative of that. I don't have to work around when to finish to reduce the amount of exposure. Typically, I would wait till the end of the day to use, some type of oil-based finish. We close up the shop and spend all the time in the house, and we don't smell it. I don't have to worry about that now. I can put a coat of finish down in the morning, and as long as I'm not stirring up a whole bunch of dust, which would never happen in my absolutely immaculately clean shop. Yeah, right. I can do that anytime I want. So how do you protect your lungs from VOCs? Well, number one, if you can eliminate them, that's a real good idea. But if you are using VOCs, I use a lot of shellac. The carrier is alcohol. Yeah, that produces VOCs. And I wear a respirator whenever I'm spraying shellac. You need a good quality, comfortable, well-fitting, carbon-based filtration respirator. Now these are rated for vapor. You need to read the label and make sure that you're getting one that is rated for vapor. You can't use your P100 dust mask or the ever popular N95 dust mask for vapor. It will not work. You have to have a vapor respirator for this to work. And no, holding your breath while you're finishing is not a good idea. Sure, you could open up a door and several windows and get a good cross ventilation, but that's not good enough either. You need to wear a respirator. If you're doing finishing and you're starting to get headaches, maybe dizziness, nausea, that is not good. You need to get out of there right now. Treat this like a gas leak in your home. You need to get outside. And there's an old adage, if you can smell finish, you have a leak. You've already been exposed. So make sure that respirator has a good seal. Now, guys with beards, this can be a real challenge. If you can't get a good seal, then maybe consider a positive pressure air supply respirator. These have a filter that deliver air under positive pressure into a face mask type respirator, and they do a really good job. They're pretty pricey. You can get $600, $700, $800 for a good quality OSHA approved positive pressure air respirator. But check into it. It might well be worth it. There are some on the market that actually aren't OSHA approved. Doesn't mean that they're ineffective, but do your research. Okay, this episode is getting a little long in the tooth, and I think we're going to save fingers for the next episode because I want to talk about a young lady who has a YouTube channel called A Butterfly House. And in her video, My Major Table Saw Accident, she relates what happened and the consequences after the accident. And it really kind of made me start thinking about, shop safety in general, hence this podcast episode. And she made me start thinking about my own shop and what I'm doing out there. And I've made some changes based on her video. But we're going to save that till next week because this is getting long in the tooth, and I did promise to try to keep these things down under 30 minutes, which I've probably violated by now. So check out the show notes for some of those links that I mentioned earlier. And the missed job of the week, well, really wasn't a missed job. Someone contacted me about an old wood canvas canoe they had. And of course, I'm just a sucker for old wood canvas canoes. And I promised that I would put her on my list, which will probably be 2 years until I get around to it. And she emailed me back and said, I have another canoe that I'd also like to get on the list. So that list just continues to grow. And a video recommendation for this week, I actually don't really have one because I was planning on using a butterfly house as a recommendation. So you'll have to tune in next week and we'll continue with that. So as always, thank you for listening. Please reach out with any questions, comments, criticisms that you have. And until next week, happy woodworking.